Graham Norton started the show with his usual bright energy, the red chair glowing behind him, the audience clapping as he leaned forward with that mischievous smile, introducing his guest for the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, give a huge welcome to the one and only Will Smith. The crowd erupted, the band played, and Will walked onto the stage, clapping back at the audience with his wide grin, giving his trademark charismatic entrance, hugging Graham and settling into his seat. Graham leaned in, eyes twinkling. Will, it's been too long. Last time you were here you had everyone in stitches with your story about trying to impress your kids with your dance moves. I assume you've gotten better since then. Will laughed, shaking his head. No man, if anything, I've gotten worse. My kids, they don't let me forget it. Every time I try to dance in the house, they say, "Dad, please sit down before you hurt yourself." The audience chuckled, Graham chuckled too, but then tilted his head slightly. You know, you've always been someone who seems like you have no fear of embarrassment, like you'll throw yourself into anything. Movies, music, even awkward moments. And speaking of awkward moments, Graham paused for effect, the audience waiting. There's something that's still hanging in the air, isn't there? Something everyone remembers from a certain awards night. The studio tensed up immediately, the laughter turning into those polite murmurs of people unsure where it might go. Will's smile faltered just slightly, but he straightened in his chair, trying to keep his composure. "Ah, Graham, I see where you're going with this," he said, voice lighter than his eyes. "You're talking about the slap, right? Man, I knew we weren't going to get through tonight without that coming up." Graham nodded, keeping the grin, but it was sharper now. "Well, you know me, Will. I like to poke where it stings a little. I mean, it's the biggest TV moment in decades. It'd be rude not to mention it." The audience laughed nervously, a few claps, but Will leaned back, lips tightening. "Yeah, but you know, there's a difference between poking and pressing, man. And I've been doing a lot of work to move past that. So maybe we don't drag it out here tonight." Graham raised his eyebrows, holding up his hands. "Fair enough, fair enough. But you have to admit, you brought it into living rooms all over the world. People want to hear you unpack it. That's part of why you're here, isn't it?" Will's face changed, the playful energy cooling. "Hold up. I thought I was here to have fun, tell some stories, not to be grilled like I'm on trial." The room grew heavier, the audience shifting uncomfortably, sensing the tension rise. Graham, ever the showman, tried to twist it into humor. "Oh, come on, Will. If you can't take a little heat from me, how are you going to survive the internet?" The joke got a scattered laugh, but Will didn't laugh. He leaned forward, voice lower, sharper now. "You think it's funny, huh? People laughing at something that nearly broke me, nearly broke my family? You want clicks and headlines, Graham, but you don't know what that felt like." Graham tilted his head, still smiling, but his eyes were reading Will carefully. "I think you're underestimating me. I've been doing this a long time. People sit here, they talk, they share. That's what the show's about. I don't set out to hurt anyone, but I also don't avoid the elephant in the room." Will exhaled, shaking his head, his composure visibly slipping. He laughed, but it wasn't his usual laugh, more a sharp release of frustration. "You know what, Graham? Maybe the elephant doesn't want to be dragged out in front of everybody again. Maybe the elephant wants to just sit here, crack some jokes, and go home without being turned into your headline tomorrow morning." The audience applauded, a few cheers supporting him, sensing the defensiveness. Graham tried again, softening his tone. "I hear you, Will. I do. But you've always been someone who owned the moment. You've built your career on facing things head-on. Why stop now?" Will's jaw clenched. He turned toward Graham, eyes narrowing, and for the first time his voice cut through the theater without the usual charm. "You know what, Graham? F*** off, Norton." The words dropped heavy, silencing the crowd. A ripple of gasps filled the studio, and even Graham blinked, his smile faltering for the briefest moment. The cameras caught the tension raw, Will sitting upright, defiant, while Graham leaned back in his chair, caught off guard but already calculating how to spin it. The audience was frozen, unsure whether to laugh or recoil. Will didn't break eye contact with Graham, his expression saying everything his words didn't. Graham gave a small chuckle, shaking his head as though to downplay it. Well, I did say we poke where it stings. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we just found tonight's headline. A nervous laugh from the crowd, but the atmosphere was charged now, a crackle of anticipation, because everyone knew this was no ordinary interview anymore. The studio air was still thick from the moment we'll drop the words, the kind of silence where every person in the audience felt they had witnessed something unscripted, raw, and unplanned, and Graham, for all his years of experience hosting celebrities from every corner of Hollywood, suddenly had to recalibrate in real time because this was not banter anymore, this was something that could derail the whole show if he let it. He leaned forward slowly, folding his hands, that famous wry smile. Trying to recover the flow. All right, Will, that's a first for me. I've had people throw shoes, storm off, even fall asleep on this sofa, but I've never had someone tell me that on air. It's a new milestone. The audience laughed nervously, some clapping, but Will sat back, still taut, still staring, and then finally broke into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Well, hey man, milestones are what I do. But you gotta understand, sometimes enough is enough. Graham nodded, acknowledging it with a little bow of his head. Fair enough. So let's try a different angle. You've had one of the biggest careers in Hollywood history, from music to blockbuster films to now producing. Surely there's a story you can give us that doesn't end with headlines tomorrow morning. Will chuckled, finally easing just a fraction. All right, let me give you something. Back when I was shooting Independence Day, I thought I was hot stuff, the new kid taking over the world. And there was this one scene where I had to drag that alien body across the desert, right? Looked tough on screen, but man, what people don't know is that thing weighed nearly 200 pounds. And it was 120 degrees out there. By the third take, I was hallucinating. I swear I started talking to that alien like it was real. The crowd burst into laughter. Graham clapped his hands together. Oh, that's fantastic. Did the alien talk back? Will grinned now, leaning in. Man, I don't remember. For all I know it did. But I do remember the director coming up to me and saying, Will, stop making friends with the props, we're losing daylight. The laughter rolled over the set, and for a brief moment the tension was diffused, everyone back in the comfort zone, until Graham tilted the conversation again, gently, but pointedly. See, that's the Will people love. The funny, larger-than-life storyteller. That's why people are always shocked when they see another side of you. They can't quite reconcile it. Will's smile thinned again. You really can't help yourself, huh, Graham? Norton shrugged lightly. It's my job, Will. I don't bring people here to say the same things they've said 100 times. People want the unfiltered version. They want to know what's under the surface. Will leaned forward now, his voice dropping so only the microphones could catch it clearly. You want unfiltered? Here's unfiltered. Sometimes I'm tired of being everyone's clown. Sometimes I'm tired of smiling when I don't feel like it. You think you know me because you've seen my movies and heard my songs, but you don't know what it's like to walk out every day with the weight of an image the world expects you to keep up. That slap? That wasn't about one joke. That was about 20 years of swallowing things, keeping it in, until it snapped. And you, he gestured at Graham now, eyes narrowing, you're doing the same thing right here. You're pressing me for that moment because you know it'll trend, not because you care about me as a man. The room was stunned, the audience hushed in fascination, caught between discomfort and awe at how raw it had become. Graham, to his credit, didn't flinch, though his smile softened into something almost reflective. You might be right. Maybe I do want the trending clip. But maybe part of me also thinks you deserve to say it in your own words instead of letting everyone else define it for you. Maybe this chair is the safest place for that, strange as it sounds. Will blinked, surprised at the turn, and the two men locked eyes in a silence that stretched for a beat too long, before Will exhaled heavily, shaking his head but with a small laugh creeping in. You're smooth, Norton. I'll give you that. The audience laughed, clapping, tension breaking again, but now there was an undercurrent, because everyone knew they weren't done. This was only circling around something bigger. Graham leaned back, sipping his glass of water. Smooth, maybe. Stubborn, definitely. And you're stubborn too, Will. Which is why this is fascinating. Will smiled, but it was the smile of someone who was still deciding whether to fight or forgive, and he said, all right, then let's do it this way. You keep pushing, but just remember, I push back. The crowd hooped at the energy, sensing the sparring tone, and Graham nodded. Deal. But tell me this, what's the one story from your career you've never told because it made you look too human, too vulnerable? Will leaned back, scratching his chin, thinking the silence heavy, and then he said, "Okay, there was a time during The Pursuit of Happiness when we were filming the bathroom scene, me and my son, and I broke down for real. Not acting, not scripted. Just broke. Because it hit me that I wasn't playing a man struggling. I was a man struggling in real life, in ways nobody saw. And that was the first time I realized that people might love the actor, but the man was always just a step away from falling apart." The room went still, the story piercing in its honesty, the audience hanging on it, and Graham softly now said, "That's the Will I wanted to hear. The man, not the mask." Will nodded slowly, but then his eyes hardened again, as though the vulnerability had cost him something, and he smirked, "Careful though, Graham. Keep peeling too many layers and you might not like what's underneath." The warning landed, the crowd murmured, and Graham, unfazed, raised his glass to him. "Well, lucky for me, I've always liked messy television." The audience roared, some clapping, some laughing nervously, as the tension shifted once more into anticipation, because it was clear that before the night was over, something even bigger was bound to happen. The studio felt electric now, the kind of atmosphere where every cough, every laugh, every shuffle of a chair was amplified because people knew they were witnessing something more than an ordinary late-night chat, and Graham, always one to steer the storm rather than run from it, leaned forward with that half-grin and said, "So Will, you've given us comedy, pain, and even a warning, but I think we're still waiting for one last thing tonight. Resolution. Can you give us that?" Will raised his eyebrows, his smile curling in a way that carried both humor and defiance. "Resolution, huh? You think this is a Hollywood movie where everything wraps up neat at the end?" The audience laughed, but there was an edge to it, because Will's energy was unpredictable. Graham, unflinching, shot back, "Well, you've been making Hollywood movies long enough. You know the audience demands a third-act payoff." Will paused, glanced at the crowd, then leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You want payoff? Here it is. I've spent years being the Fresh Prince, the action hero, the guy who saves the world, makes the joke, keeps it light. And for years that worked, because people wanted to believe I was untouchable. But what happens when you show them you're not? They turn on you, they laugh at you, they write about you. And here we are with you trying to make me say something I can't take back, so it lives forever on YouTube." The crowd murmured. Graham smiled gently, almost kindly now. "Maybe I want you to say something you can't take back because it's true, not because it's damning. People don't want untouchable, they want real. And you, Will, for all your charm and talent, have been hiding behind untouchable for decades." Will blinked, exhaling heavily, then let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Man, you really know how to work an angle, don't you? You're like a magician. Keep talking until the rabbit appears out of nowhere." Graham leaned back, hands spread. "Well, let's hope tonight the rabbit's not throwing punches." The audience laughed loudly at that, some clapping, but Will didn't bristle this time. He smiled, even chuckled, then wagged a finger at Graham. "You're lucky you're funny. Because 5 minutes ago, I was ready to walk out of here." The audience erupted into cheers and laughter, the tension breaking like a dam, and Graham leaned in quickly to seize the moment. "And we would have followed you all the way to the parking lot, because let's be honest, this has been one of the most riveting hours of television I've ever done." The audience roared. Will laughed fully now, shaking his head. "All right, man, all right, you win. You poked, you pressed, and somehow we're still sitting here. Maybe that's the real miracle." Graham raised his glass. "To miracles, then." Will clinked it with his water bottle, the audience applauding loudly, but just when it seemed the storm had finally calmed, Graham decided to risk one last joke, and to the fact that tonight, for the first time in my career, someone told me to F*** off on my own show. The crowd howled. Will covered his face in mock embarrassment, then stood up, laughing and throwing his arms wide at the audience. "And you all stayed. That's love right there." The cheer was deafening, and as Will sat back down, the camera zoomed on both men smiling, battle-worn, but smiling, and Graham concluded, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can safely say tonight will be one for the history books. Will Smith, thank you for being as real as it gets." The applause filled the studio. The band played, and though the night had flirted with disaster, it ended not in anger but in something deeper, two men clashing, challenging, and finally respecting each other under the glare of the cameras.